In this demo, we're going to have a look at the next question, which is for network architecture 5122. The last activity in section B is activity 4, which is virtual solution. So there's a previous video that I did that covers for section B of your POE activities 1, 2, and 3. So you need to have completed activities 1, 2, and 3, which is the network solution proposal, and then also the network diagrams, in order for you to complete activity 4. Now, activity 4 is the practical implementation of our network. For this part, we are going to implement part of the scenario. In other words, we're going to take a section of the network, one server and one client. We're going to connect them to each other to display hardware configuration, software configuration, and anything else that they might ask us for. So what are they asking us to do here? They say, take a portion of the network. Then I need to document that. They tell me how to arrange my document, cover page, description of the network, page numbers, header and footer with your student numbers, etc. There are videos that shows you how to do all of this, how to create your assignment document, etc. All the screenshots need to provide evidence of the configuration. In other words, you need to show your username displayed in some place of the screenshot that you are taking, and only certain screenshots are required. Like we have given you a answer guide for part 1, part 2, which screenshots were required. So you can use, I'm referring to your CNOS module. In this module, it was theory for part 1 and part 2. The only practical part is now in your POE, where you need to install a virtual server and then also a client. The marking rubric says configuration of the physical network infrastructure. Physical means the physical computers that have been installed and set up. Then it says logical infrastructure, which is the software. And then it's talking about configuration of network services. Network security, here we look at a firewall. And then performance and monitoring using appropriate tools mentioned in your proposal document. So these are the 4 sections that we need to be aware of. Hardware, how are we going to do this? We'll open up our virtual computers, our virtual lab, Azure Virtual Lab, create a new. So I'm going to open up Hyper-V once I'm inside of my virtual computer. If I have completed all of my other work and I don't require it, the old virtual machines that I might have here, you can delete it. If you have run out of space, for example, it's not allowing me to create a server computer. I go to File Explorer, and if I click on this PC, and this one here is red, meaning I don't have enough disk space because of all of the previous work that I've done. What I can do is I can go and delete it by clicking on Edit Disk, go next, click on Browse, and then it will list all of the different virtual machines and their hard drives that were created. I will then right-click on each one that I do not require, and then I'll click on Delete. So here, for example, I can see that this is disk 2, I don't need that, I'm going to delete it. Disk 3, I don't need it, I'm going to delete it. Disk 4, don't need it, delete. 5, delete. 7, I don't need, delete. 6, I don't need, delete. And then I'll say cancel. Then when I go back now to look at my free disk space on the C drive, it should give me more disk space here. Okay, once I refresh this. Now, creating the server. New, virtual machine. Next. This is my Suban NWAR server. And this is going to be 2022. I'll go next. Generation 2, next. Memory will be 2000. Next. And I'm going to connect it to a private switch. Go next. Create the virtual hard drive next. Install from, I'm going to select the ISO, browse, and there's server 2022. Go next, and then finish. I'm going to double click, or I can click on connect, or I can click on start here. And when I start, it's going to start and it's going to ask to boot from the disk. So it says press any key to boot. So I'm going to reset, and then I'll press any key on my keyboard, and then it will start loading the files. Now we're going to go through the installation of your Windows Server computer. In the same way, we're going to do an installation of your client computer. I'm going to go next, install now. Here it is important to select the second option, which is the standard evaluation desktop experience. Then I go next. I accept the license agreement. Next. Custom installation. Go next. And then it starts copying the files for the installation. We are familiar with this because we did it in the CNOS module. So whilst this one is copying, I'm going to create the client computer that I need. Or I can actually rename and use one of the existing ones that I have here as my client computer. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take the one from my CNOS and I'm going to rename it. And I'm going to say Win 10 this is NWAR now. And this is my client. So I've renamed, I've used this one because I finished what I needed to do for CNOS. So I'm going to rename that. If you do not rename it, you can create a new one like we did for CNOS. So there's a number of videos that shows you how to do that. I'm going to start this client. Connect. Log in. Okay, so I'm going to, whilst I'm here with inside of this client, I'm just going to rename it so that it is, the computer name is going to be user friendly so I can remember it. Right click on my start, go to the system, and then I'm going to, currently it's Windows 10B. So I'm just going to rename this PC. So Subin Win 10. Um, I'm just going to put C here for client. It's going to restart. So there's my server that's installing, and then there's my client. Let me have a look at the client name now. Go back to system. And it says Win10C. So I know this is my client. C is for client. Then I can just minimize this. This one is rebooting. My server is being installed. So whilst all of this is happening, let's see now what is it that I need to be, what screenshots I would need to be taking. Here it says for 20 marks, adequate configuration of the network infrastructure hardware. That means a client is installed, a server is installed, the client is connected to the server. IP address conventions are matching. So we'll need to do some work before we can start taking our screenshots. So let's go back into the virtual computer. The client, Windows 10 client, username and password. Okay, so this is my server now. So username is administrator on my server, and then I'm going to set a password. and go finish. Connect. I'm going to log on to my server. Now that I've logged on to my server, I'm going to firstly rename it. So it's opening up Server Manager, which is the main administration tool. And it says I can use the Windows Admin Center to manage the server as well. So looking at the server now, I can see currently it's got a name, Win whatever. So I'm going to click on that name and I'm going to say change. And I'm going to give it a name that is user friendly. So Ben, server SRV, and this is 2022. So I've given it a new name. I'm going to say OK. OK again, and it's going to restart. I'll log in. Click on my local server and check that the name has been changed. There's the computer name, Subain SRV 2022. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set a static IP address. Static means a manual or one that doesn't change. So I'm going to right click here and I'm going to open network and internet settings. Go to the Ethernet, change adapter, and I'm going to change this one, right click, properties, IP version 4, properties, and I'm going to set a static IP address of 192.168 192.168.10.10. My server's address now is 192.168.10.10. And I'll say OK and close. I'm going to go back to Hyper-V and to check that both these computers are on the same switch. So the client, if I click on the settings for the client, and if I click on network adapter, I can see that it is on private switch. I'll say OK. I'll click on the server and I'll click on settings. On network adapter, it's also on private switch. They both connected to the same switch. And then I'll say, okay. Next, I'm now going to install Active Directory, which is part of the software that's used to manage the network on the server. So I go into my server, click on Start, Server Manager, and I'm going to add roles and features. Go next, 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 and I'm going to select Active Directory Domain Services. Add features, go next, 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 and then install. Whilst it's doing this, let me just go back and check on in Learn, according to my scenario, if I go to more resources, there's the scenario diagram. It's a library and multimedia technology center. It's for a government organization, and there are two sites in the case study, Site 1 and Site 2. We are doing an installation of one client, one server for Site 1. So I can abbreviate this to LMTM, TC, LMTC, Library and Multimedia Technology Center. Going back to my Hyper-V, I can close this. And then on the left-hand side here, I can see now I've got something called ADDS, or Active Directory Domain Services. When I click on Active Directory Domain Services, you can see here that there's more that needs to be done. There's a promote this to a server, to a domain controller. So I'm going to click on promote. I'm going to say add a new forest. What is the name of this forest or this domain? So Subin, and then we said it's library, multimedia, technology center, right? So it will be your name, LMTC for library, multimedia and technology center, and we'll say .gov so that we know it's a governmental organization. So this is the domain now that we are creating. Go next. I need to give it a password. Go next. Next. Go next. 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 And then install. What we are doing now is we are creating the software on the hardware. Part of that software is Active Directory, which is running on the server. When I'm installing Active Directory, it automatically installs DNS. That's also part of the software that's used to manage the network. That's called infrastructure software. What does DNS do for me? It tells me what is an IP address for any host name that has been given. It's going to reboot. So whilst all of this is happening, I can go and I can start taking my screenshots that is required for this scenario. So let me open up a new Word document. File, save as, it is Subin, NWAR, POE, and I'm going to save that. Mm, okay, I'm just going to save it in my documents on this computer for now. I'm going to save it later in my. So this is Subin, POE, NWAR 5122. And I'm going to start taking screenshots that's going to be proving or answering the question. So where's the question paper? Here. I need to firstly, for 20 marks, take information that says network infrastructure, hardware. So what am I going to be taking for network infrastructure? I'm going to go into my Word document, network infrastructure. And to create my network, I need to show that I've got a server, I've got a client, I've got a switch that's connecting them. Okay, there's it here. Notice now, once my server has rebooted, it's now going to boot, it's going to assign me into which domain? Suben Library Multimedia Technology Center domain, the one that I just created. And then I'm going to use the username of administrator, the password that I set when I installed the server, and now it's going to log me into the domain. So whilst this is booting, I'm going to go into Hyper-V Manager. And in my Hyper-V Manager, I'm going to take a few screenshots here. So the first one is going to be of Hyper-V Manager, showing that I've got a client and a server computer. These are my physical computers that I've installed. And they are named correctly for this module. So let me just minimize this and drag that across. I'm going to go into, there's my Word document. I'm going to open up my snipping tool, Windows snip, take a new snip, and here in my Hyper-V, I can show that I've got two virtual computers. I'm going to paste it here. Hyper-V Manager, showing the client and server hardware. Then I'm also going to go inside and show the actual computers that are working. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to there's my client computer. So I'll need to take a screenshot of this client computer. So there's my client. Client computer installed and renamed. I will do the same for the server. So there's my server. I can click on the local server. And then I can see there's server manager, and it's showing me the computer's name is Suben Server 2022. I can just minimize this one and take a new snip. So I'm taking enough of a snip to show that the server is up and running and it's working. Server installed. And renamed. Now, on the left here, I can see if I click on ADDS, ADDS has been installed, and also DNS has been installed. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the dashboard again, and I'm going to say add roles and features. I'm going to go next, 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 and this time I'm going to install DHCP. This is part of my infrastructure that needs to be added. Add features, next, next, and install. What does DHCP do for me? DHCP has a range or a pool of IP addresses that I can give to the client computer. And I'm going to set the client computer to get its IP address from the DHCP server. Configuration required. So I can close this. I can click on DHCP on the left, and then it says there's configuration required. So I can click on more, and I can complete DHCP configuration. Go next. I'm going to use the same logon detail and close. And then I'm going to complete DHCP configuration. Then to manage my DHCP server, I'm going to go to Tools, and I'm going to select DHCP. It's going to maximize this. And I can see it's currently running. Then I need to add a scope. Scope is that range of IP addresses that the server can give out. I'm going to right click on IP version 4, go to new scope, go next, and then I'll call it Subin scope, go next. What IP addresses is it going to give to the clients? 192.168.10.10 to 100. And it's going to end at 192.168.10.100. Now, my server's IP address was 10.10, so I'll need to exclude 10.10. I'm going to go next, and it says add any exclusions. Type in the IP address range that you want to exclude. If you want to exclude a single IP address, then type in the start address only. So I want to exclude, the server must not give out my IP address, 192.168.10.10. And I'm going to say add. You can see it's not going to give out that address. Go next, next. DHCP, any other options you want to configure? We'll go next. What is the default gateway? It must be at the address of the server, 192.168.10.10. 10. Click on add, go next. and then I'm going to go next, next, activate the scope, yes, and finish. So it says now that my scope is currently active. The range of IP addresses that the server can give out is from 192.168.10.10 to 192.168.10.100. I'm going to take a screenshot of this to show that I've configured my DHCP server. So go and take a screenshot. DHCP server configured. Now I'm going to set my client computer to get its IP address from the server. Go into my client. There's my Windows 10 client. Go to its properties, the network and internet settings. Click on Ethernet, adapter, right click, or change adapter options, right click, properties, TCP IP version 4 properties, and this one must be set to obtain IP address automatically. Also, DNS must be obtained automatically. When I set the client to obtain IP address automatically, it's going to ask on the network now for a server to give it an IP address. And let's see what happens. Okay, close. It says, do you want to allow your computer? Yes. And now I'm on the client computer. If I double click on it, and if I go to its to details, you will see that I've got an IP address from the server. There's the server here. Suben LMTC.gov gave me an IP address, and my IP address is 192.168.10.11. Can you see? So I'm going to now take a screenshot of my client getting its IP address from the server. So client obtained IP address from server. So adequate configuration of network infrastructure, that's hardware. We've got a client, we've got a server, we've got a switch. We didn't take a picture of the switch. Let's go back and take a picture of the switch. So I'm going to close this, close that, and go to Hyper-V. Remember, both these computers here, we connected to the same switch. So there's Virtual Switch Manager. I click on Virtual Switch Manager, and I click on Private Switch, and now I can show that I've got a private switch. If you don't have a private switch here, then you can create a new switch using the Virtual Switch Manager. So you've got default switch, you've got private switch, or you can click here to say new virtual switch. So new, private switch, create switch, and then you'll give it a name if you require it. I'm going to remove that one, and I'm going to go back to my private switch, and I'm going to take a screenshot of this one. So restore, Snipping Tool, new, and then I can take, this one is showing me my name on the top there. So I'm going to take a screenshot, and I'm going to put it here in my document. So I've got client, server, and then I need to put in the switch. Private switch. So far, I've got a client, I've got a server, I've got a switch, and then I've installed DNS, Active Directory, DHCP. Naming conventions of IP address match the details in the proposal. Adequate or comprehensive narration description of how you did what we have done. Configuration of logical network infrastructure or software. So we'll stop the demo here, and then we'll continue in the next video.